Sometimes the greatest love story begins the very moment someone believes they have already lost. Ethan Brooks smiled as though the world had finally decided to be kind to him again. Standing outside apartment 14 at Willow Heights, with a paper grocery bag tucked beneath one arm, the 39-year-old widowed carpenter adjusted his work gloves before looking toward the woman who had quietly become one of the most familiar faces in his everyday life. Victoria Hayes had just returned from another day, leading one of the largest real estate companies in America. Yet she carried herself with the same graceful warmth she showed every neighbor in the community. Her elegant navy business suit looked perfectly tailored, but there was nothing intimidating about the gentle smile she offered the children playing nearby or the elderly residents who greeted her by name. Ethan had always admired that about her. She never acted like someone whose success placed her above anyone else. "Long day?" Ethan asked as Lily skipped ahead toward the courtyard playground with a small sketchbook tucked beneath her arm. Victoria nodded softly. "The usual meetings." Ethan chuckled. "I cannot imagine sitting in meetings all day. I would rather fix broken cabinets." Victoria laughed, the sound light enough to make even an ordinary evening feel peaceful. "Some days I think I would rather fix cabinets too." They stood together beneath the warm glow of the courtyard lights while neighbors watered flowers, walked their dogs, and exchanged friendly conversations after dinner. Everything about the evening felt ordinary, and perhaps that was why neither of them expected the next few words to change everything. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck with an embarrassed smile. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something." Victoria looked at him with genuine curiosity. "What is it?" Ethan hesitated for only a second before speaking. "I have a date this Saturday." Time seemed to pause without anyone else noticing. Children continued laughing near the swing set. A distant lawn sprinkler quietly sprayed across fresh green grass. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes gently moved in the evening breeze. Only, Victoria felt as though the entire world had suddenly become silent. She smiled almost immediately, a smile so natural that Ethan never questioned it for a second. "That is wonderful," she said warmly. "I'm happy for you." Ethan looked relieved. "Her name is Emily. We met at the public library while Lily was checking out books. She seems very kind." Victoria nodded with perfect composure. "Kind people are rare. I hope she makes you happy." Ethan smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I was nervous about starting over after all these years, but Lily keeps telling me life deserves second chances." Victoria glanced toward the little girl drawing quietly beneath a maple tree. "She's a very wise young lady." Ethan laughed. "She gets that from her mother." Neither of them spoke for several seconds after that. The silence was comfortable for Ethan, but for Victoria, it felt almost impossible to carry. She had imagined countless conversations with him over the years. She had pictured telling him how much she admired the quiet dignity with which he rebuilt his life after losing his wife. She had imagined admitting that every time she visited Willow Heights, she secretly hoped to find him repairing a fence, helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries, or cheering Lily on as she learned something new. Instead, she simply smiled. Ethan picked up his grocery bag. "Well, I should get dinner started before Lily convinces me ice cream counts as a balanced meal." Victoria laughed again. "Good luck with that." He waved before walking toward his apartment, calling Lily to come inside. Lily ran over, stopped briefly beside Victoria, and hugged her without hesitation. "Good night, Miss Victoria." Victoria gently hugged her back. "Good night, sweetheart." The apartment door closed behind them a few moments later. The cheerful sounds from inside drifted faintly through the hallway before disappearing completely. Only then did Victoria's smile slowly fade. She remained standing alone beneath the courtyard lights, looking toward the closed door as though part of her heart had quietly walked inside with them. For years, she had hidden her feelings behind polite conversations, careful distance, and small acts of kindness that expected nothing in return. She had convinced herself that loving him silently was enough because his happiness mattered more than her own. Yet hearing that simple sentence, "I have a date this Saturday," had shattered the peaceful lie she had repeated to herself for far too long. For the first time in years, The billionaire who could buy almost anything in the world realized there was one thing she had waited too long to fight for. The following morning, the skyline of downtown Chicago shimmered beneath clear autumn sunlight as Victoria Hayes stepped out of a black sedan and entered the headquarters of Hayes Urban Development. Employees greeted her with genuine respect, and she answered every smile with the same quiet kindness that had earned their loyalty over the years. No one could have guessed that the confident billionaire who managed projects worth billions of dollars had barely slept the night before. She walked through polished marble corridors lined with modern artwork until she reached the executive boardroom overlooking Lake Michigan. The room slowly filled with attorneys, financial analysts, architects, and senior executives, each carrying reports that represented months of preparation. On the enormous display screen waited the final presentation for an acquisition that would expand the company into 3 new states. Rebecca Collins, Victoria's longtime executive assistant, placed a folder beside her chair and smiled politely. "Everything is ready whenever you are." Victoria nodded. "Thank you, Rebecca." The meeting began precisely at 9 o'clock. Charts appeared across the screen. Revenue projections climbed steadily upward. Investors joined through video conference from New York, Dallas, and Seattle. Voices discussed percentages, contracts, construction schedules, and projected returns over the next 10 years. Under normal circumstances, Victoria could recall every figure without glancing at her notes. Today, however, every number blurred into the same distant noise. Her mind wandered back to the peaceful courtyard at Willow Heights. She remembered Ethan's relaxed smile as he spoke about Saturday. She remembered the excitement in his voice when he mentioned meeting someone at the public library. Most of all, she remembered how naturally he had thanked her for being happy for him. He had trusted her smile because he had never imagined it could hide heartbreak. "Victoria," one of the board members asked gently. She looked up, realizing the room had become unexpectedly quiet. "Would you like to approve the final proposal?" She glanced toward the presentation, but instead saw Ethan helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries only a few weeks earlier. She remembered watching from her car without letting him notice. He had spent nearly 30 minutes fixing the man's broken porch railing before quietly returning home without accepting a single dollar. Another memory followed. Ethan teaching Lily how to ride her bicycle while laughing every time she lost her balance. Then another. Ethan organizing donated winter coats for families before making sure everyone else chose first. Victoria had witnessed countless moments like those over the years during her quiet visits to Willow Heights. None of them had been planned. None of them had been performed for attention. They were simply the kind of man Ethan chose to be when nobody was watching. "Victoria," Rebecca repeated softly. Victoria blinked and lowered her eyes to the documents. "I apologize. Could we postpone the final vote until tomorrow morning?" The request surprised everyone. The acquisition had been carefully scheduled for months. Still, no one questioned her judgment. She had built the company through wisdom rather than impulse. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca followed Victoria back to her office, carrying the untouched folder. After closing the door, she hesitated before speaking. "May I ask you something personal?" Victoria looked toward the city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Of course." Rebecca smiled gently. "This is the first meeting I have ever seen you postpone. Was it really about the numbers?" Victoria remained silent for several long seconds. Finally, she answered with complete honesty. "No, Rebecca guatid patiently." Victoria rested one hand against the glass and watched tiny cars move far below. "Yesterday, someone I care about told me he is finally giving his heart another chance." Rebecca studied her employer with quiet understanding. "And you wish that chance had been with you." Victoria closed her eyes briefly before whispering the words she had never allowed herself to say aloud. "I have wished that for a very long time." Saturday arrived with bright blue skies and a cool breeze drifting through the tree-lined streets of Chicago. Ethan Brooks checked the time on the old wristwatch his late wife had once given him before calling toward the bedroom. "Lily, are you almost ready?" A cheerful voice answered immediately. "I have been ready for 10 whole minutes." Ethan smiled as his daughter appeared wearing a yellow sweater, blue jeans, and a bright grin that seemed capable of making any difficult day feel lighter. Before leaving the apartment, she studied him carefully with surprising seriousness. "You are nervous." Ethan laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" Lily nodded. "You have fixed 3 picture frames that were not even broken." Ethan looked toward the living room, where the perfectly straight picture frames lined the wall. "Maybe I was just making sure everything looked nice." Lily folded her arms with playful confidence. "No, you were thinking too much." Ethan gently ruffled her hair before the two of them walked toward the neighborhood library, where Lily would spend the afternoon reading while Ethan met Emily for coffee at the cafe next door. The library had always been one of Lily's favorite places, filled with colorful shelves, quiet corners, and familiar librarians who greeted her by name. Emily was already waiting outside the cafe when Ethan arrived. She wore a simple green sweater and offered a warm, genuine smile that immediately put him at ease. "I'm glad you came," she said. Ethan nodded politely. "So, am I." Their conversation flowed naturally during the first half hour. They talked about favorite books, growing up in different parts of the Midwest, family traditions, and the little surprises that made ordinary days memorable. Emily was thoughtful, patient, and easy to talk with. She listened carefully whenever Ethan mentioned Lily, asking questions that showed sincere interest rather than polite obligation. Ethan appreciated that more than he expected. Yet every now and then his attention quietly drifted beyond the cafe windows toward the familiar sidewalks of Willow Heights. He found himself remembering conversations with Victoria that had never seemed extraordinary until now. The way she always remembered Lily's school events. The way she somehow noticed when an elderly resident needed help before anyone else did. The way she listened without ever making another person's worries feel small. Emily noticed his thoughtful expression and smiled kindly. "You seem far away for a moment." Ethan looked back with an apologetic smile. "I am sorry. I suppose it has been a long week." Emily nodded with understanding. Starting over is not always simple. Ethan appreciated her honesty. "No, it is not." Meanwhile, several miles away, Victoria stood alone inside her spacious penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Expensive artwork decorated the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed breathtaking views. Every comfort money could provide surrounded her, yet the silence inside the home felt unusually heavy. On a nearby bookshelf rested a framed drawing Lily had given her nearly a year earlier after a neighborhood picnic. 3 smiling figures held hands beneath a bright blue sky. Above them, written in uneven, childlike letters, were the words, "My favorite people." Victoria gently picked up the drawing and traced the crayon lines with her fingertips. She still remembered Lily proudly explaining that families did not always begin the same way, but kindness always helped them grow. Victoria smiled through eyes that had quietly filled with tears. Down in the courtyard at Willow Heights, maintenance workers suddenly arrived with a brand new heating unit for Ethan's apartment before the colder months could begin. Ethan had requested repairs weeks earlier and expected a long wait because of budget limitations. Instead, the replacement had been approved without explanation. The workers simply smiled and said the property owner wanted every family to stay comfortable this winter. Ethan thanked them sincerely, never realizing that the approval had been signed personally by Victoria late the previous evening after returning from her office. It was only one more quiet act of care among many she had never intended him to discover. As evening approached, Ethan walked home with Lily, carrying a small stack of library books beneath one arm. Lily looked up at her father and asked the simple question that stayed with him the rest of the walk. "Did today make your heart feel happy, Daddy?" Ethan paused before answering. He smiled gently, but for reasons he could not yet explain, the answer did not come as easily as he thought it would. The next morning arrived quietly, wrapping Willow Heights in crisp autumn air and golden sunlight that filtered through rows of maple trees. Ethan Brooks sat at the small kitchen table, drinking fresh coffee, while Lily colored another picture beside him. Neither of them mentioned the date from the day before, until Lily finally looked up from her crayons with a thoughtful expression that often reminded Ethan how much wisdom could live inside an 8-year-old heart. Daddy, she asked softly. Yes, sweetheart. She tilted her head. Did you have a good time with Miss Emily? Ethan smiled. I did. She is a very nice person. Lily nodded, as though carefully considering every word before asking another question. Then why are you smiling only with your mouth? Ethan blinked in surprise. What do you mean? Lily reached across the table and gently touched his cheek. Your mouth smiles, but your eyes do not. Ethan could not answer immediately. Instead, he stared into his coffee as morning light reflected across the surface. He had spent years teaching Lily that honesty mattered, even when the truth felt complicated. Sometimes, he finally said, being with a kind person does not always mean they are the person your heart feels most peaceful around. Lily seemed satisfied with the answer, even though she probably understood more than he realized. She returned to her drawing while Ethan quietly prepared his tool bag for another day of carpentry work around the neighborhood. Several miles away, Victoria Hayes stood inside her penthouse before leaving for another demanding day at the office. As she reached for her handbag, her eyes settled once again on the framed drawing resting beside a bookshelf. She picked it up with both hands and smiled gently. The picture had faded slightly over the past year, but the bright crayon colors still carried the warmth of the afternoon Lily had proudly handed it to her after the annual community picnic. 3 smiling figures stood beneath a bright blue sky, holding hands. One wore a flannel shirt. One wore a blue dress. Between them stood a little girl with yellow ribbons in her hair. Across the top, written in uneven letters, Lily had added a sentence that still touched Victoria every time she read it. My favorite family. Victoria remembered laughing softly that day and asking Lily if she had made a mistake. Lily had smiled with complete confidence. No, families are people who make you feel safe. Victoria carefully traced the tiny crayon lines before placing the picture back in its frame. She had received awards from governors, business organizations, and national charities. Her office displayed photographs with influential leaders from around the country. Yet among all the accomplishments she had collected during her career, nothing felt more valuable than a simple drawing made by a little girl who believed kindness mattered more than money. Later that afternoon, Ethan repaired kitchen cabinets for an elderly couple living only a few buildings away. As he packed his tools, the grateful husband smiled warmly. This place has changed so much over the last few years. Whoever owns these apartments really cares about people. Ethan nodded in agreement. It definitely feels that way. The older man continued. Rent has stayed reasonable. Repairs happen quickly. Families are treated with respect. That is rare these days. Ethan smiled as he looked around the peaceful courtyard. Whoever is behind it has done something special. He never imagined that the woman he spoke with almost every week had quietly shaped nearly every improvement surrounding him. That evening, Victoria stopped by Willow Heights after finishing work. She often visited without any announcement, preferring to walk through the neighborhood as simply another familiar face. As she crossed the courtyard, Lily spotted her immediately and ran over carrying the same sketchbook she had used all weekend. Miss Victoria. Victoria smiled brightly. Hello, sweetheart. Lily opened the sketchbook with obvious excitement. Inside was a brand new drawing. Once again, 3 familiar figures stood together beneath a peaceful autumn sky. Ethan, Lily, and Victoria smiled beside one another while a small white house rested in the background. Victoria looked at the picture without speaking for several seconds. Do you like it? Lily asked hopefully. Victoria's eyes filled with quiet emotion, but her smile never faded. I love it, she whispered. As Lily happily skipped back toward her father, Victoria held the drawing close to her heart, wondering if children sometimes recognize the truth long before adults ever found the courage to face it. Monday morning brought a gentle rhythm back to Willow Heights as families hurried toward work and school beneath bright autumn skies. Ethan Brooks walked Lily to the neighborhood elementary school with her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulders. She talked happily about spelling tests, art class, and a new mystery book she had borrowed from the library, while Ethan listened with the quiet attention that made every conversation with his daughter feel important. Just before they reached the school entrance, Lily suddenly looked up at him with a thoughtful smile. Daddy, Ethan squeezed her small hand. What is it? Do you know why I like Miss Victoria so much? Ethan smiled. Because she always remembers your birthday? Lily giggled. That too. She skipped one step ahead before turning back toward him. She looks at us like we matter. Ethan paused for a moment, surprised by the simple honesty of her words. Before he could answer, the school bell rang, and Lily hurried toward the entrance after giving him a quick hug. Have a good day, Daddy. You too, sweetheart. As Ethan watched her disappear into the building, her words stayed with him far longer than he expected. Across the city, Victoria Hayes arrived at the elementary school a few minutes later, carrying several boxes filled with new books that her company had quietly donated to the library. She preferred making contributions without publicity, and only the principal knew who had arranged the donation. As children filled the hallway with cheerful voices, Lily spotted her almost immediately. Miss Victoria. Victoria smiled warmly and knelt to meet her eye level. Good morning, sweetheart. Are you excited for school? Lily nodded enthusiastically before helping carry one of the lighter boxes into the library. Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, welcomed them with gratitude as students gathered around the colorful stacks of brand-new books. During art class later that morning, Mrs. Carter announced a simple assignment. Today I want everyone to draw someone who makes you feel safe. It could be anyone who helps your heart feel peaceful. Crayons immediately began moving across paper while children quietly concentrated on their pictures. Some drew parents. Others drew grandparents, teachers, firefighters, or older siblings. Lily smiled to herself before carefully choosing 3 crayons. 1 blue, 1 brown, 1 yellow. She drew herself standing between her father and Victoria, all 3 holding hands beneath a bright autumn tree outside Willow Heights. When Mrs. Carter stopped beside her desk, she smiled at the picture. Tell me about your drawing. Lily answered without hesitation. My daddy keeps me safe every day. Miss Victoria makes Daddy smile with his eyes, even when he does not know he is smiling. When they are together, everybody feels happier. Mrs. Carter gently smiled at the innocent explanation before placing a gold star on the corner of the page. After school ended that afternoon, Victoria happened to be finishing a brief meeting with the principal when Lily came running through the hallway, holding her artwork. Miss Victoria, look what I made today. Victoria accepted the drawing carefully, and the moment she saw it, she quietly stopped walking. Once again, Lily had drawn the same 3 people together. This time, however, there was something different. Above the picture, written in large, uneven letters, were the words, "The people who make me feel safe." Victoria swallowed gently as emotion filled her eyes. It is beautiful, she whispered. Lily beamed with pride. I knew you would like it. At that very moment, Ethan arrived at the front entrance after finishing work early to pick up his daughter. As he walked toward them, he noticed Victoria holding the drawing with extraordinary care, almost as though it were something priceless. She quickly smiled and thanked Lily before handing the picture back, but Ethan could not ignore the quiet emotion he had just witnessed. For the first time, he found himself wondering why every meaningful memory his daughter seemed to treasure somehow included the same remarkable woman. The following Thursday afternoon, Victoria Hayes sat at the head of another executive board meeting as architects presented the final approval package for the largest redevelopment project her company had planned that year. The investment would reshape several neighborhoods, create thousands of jobs, and dominate financial headlines across the country. Every executive around the polished conference table expected a quick decision. Victoria listened politely as charts filled the large display screen and forecasts projected record growth over the next decade. Under ordinary circumstances, she would have analyzed every detail with remarkable precision, asking thoughtful questions before confidently approving the proposal. Instead, her attention drifted toward the small, framed photograph resting quietly beside her tablet. It showed children laughing during the annual Willow Heights summer picnic. Lily stood in the center, holding a paper pinwheel, while Ethan smiled in the background without realizing the picture had ever been taken. Victoria found herself looking at that ordinary moment far longer than the impressive financial reports surrounding her. Miss Hayes, the chief financial officer, asked respectfully. Would you like us to proceed with the final authorization? Victoria slowly looked around the room. Brilliant executives waited patiently. Attorneys held prepared contracts. Investors watched through live video screens from offices across the country. Everything was ready except her heart. She closed the folder in front of her with calm confidence. We will review the final documents tomorrow morning instead. Several executives exchanged surprised glances, but no one challenged the decision. Rebecca Collins quietly gathered the presentation materials while the meeting came to a close. As the last board member left the room, Rebecca followed Victoria into the hallway. You're thinking about Willow Heights again, are not you? Victoria smiled gently without denying it. I have learned that some decisions can wait until tomorrow. Rebecca studied her employer with quiet understanding. You built an extraordinary company because you always knew what truly mattered. Victoria looked through the towering glass windows toward the distant neighborhoods stretching across the city. Sometimes success is measured by numbers. Other times it is measured by whether a little girl smiles when she sees you. Less than an hour later, instead of attending another business luncheon, Victoria drove herself to Willow Heights without security, publicity, or any announcement. She parked beneath the familiar maple trees and quietly walked through the peaceful courtyard where children played after school and neighbors greeted one another by name. As she rounded the corner near Building 3, she stopped. Ethan was kneeling beside Lily's small blue bicycle with a wrench in one hand and a gentle smile on his face. Try spinning the pedals now, he said. Lily climbed onto the bicycle and laughed as the wheels turned smoothly once again. You fixed it, Ethan grinned. That is what dads are supposed to do. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck in a quick hug before riding carefully across the sidewalk, her laughter echoing through the courtyard. Ethan watched her with quiet pride, making sure she stayed safely within sight. Victoria remained where she was, unseen behind the branches of a flowering tree, not because she wished to hide from him, but because the moment felt too beautiful to interrupt. There was no grand speech, no expensive gift, and no dramatic celebration. There was only an ordinary father repairing a bicycle for the little girl who trusted him completely. Victoria felt an unexpected peace settle over her heart. She had spent years building skyscrapers, negotiating billion-dollar agreements, and leading thousands of employees, yet nothing she had accomplished compared to the quiet strength she witnessed in that simple afternoon. Ethan looked up just as Lily rode another happy circle around the courtyard, and for a brief moment Victoria wondered whether he had seen her. Instead, he smiled at his daughter again, completely absorbed in the joy of watching her succeed. Victoria returned the smile from a distance before quietly walking back toward her car. As she drove away beneath the golden light of the setting sun, she realized that postponing one business deal had never truly been a sacrifice. Watching the man she loved become the father Lily deserved had reminded her that the richest moments in life could never be measured on a balance sheet. Friday evening settled gently over Willow Heights as dark clouds drifted across the Chicago sky, carrying the first light rain of the weekend. The sidewalks slowly emptied while neighbors hurried home carrying grocery bags and umbrellas. Ethan Brooks had just finished replacing a loose handrail outside one of the apartment buildings when the rain became steady enough to send everyone searching for shelter. He gathered his toolbox beneath the covered entrance near the community courtyard and watched the raindrops dance across the pavement. A few moments later, another familiar figure stepped beneath the same awning, folding a navy umbrella with careful hands. Victoria Hayes smiled softly when she noticed him. Looks like the weather had other plans. Ethan returned the smile. It usually wins. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. They simply listened to the gentle rhythm of rain tapping against the roof, while cool autumn air carried the fresh scent of wet leaves through the courtyard. Lily stood a short distance away beneath another covered walkway, happily spinning in circles with a small colorful paper umbrella she had made in art class. Her laughter echoed through the quiet evening, making both adults smile without thinking. Ethan finally broke the comfortable silence. Can I tell you something I've been thinking about? Victoria turned toward him. Of course. Ethan rested one hand on the handle of his toolbox before speaking. I have lived here for several years now, and every time something goes wrong around this place, somehow it gets fixed before anyone has time to complain. Victoria listened without interrupting. Ethan continued thoughtfully. The heating system was replaced before winter. Mrs. Jenkins received new wheelchair ramps. Mr. Alvarez finally got the roof repaired over Building 2. The playground equipment was updated last spring. Even little things seem to happen exactly when families need them. Victoria looked out toward the rain-covered courtyard. Someone must care very much about this community. Ethan nodded slowly. That is exactly what I was thinking. He smiled with quiet admiration. I have never met the owner, but I hope one day I can thank whoever decided people matter more than profit. Victoria lowered her eyes for a brief moment, hiding the emotion that quietly filled them. I think they would be grateful to hear that. Ethan looked at her with genuine appreciation. You know, whenever you visit, people seem calmer. The children run to you. The older residents trust you. Lily absolutely lights up every time she sees you. Victoria laughed softly. She has a remarkable way of making everyone feel important. Ethan nodded. She learned that from someone. The words lingered gently between them as rain continued falling beyond the shelter. Neither realized how much honesty was hidden inside such ordinary conversation. Lily suddenly ran toward them, holding a fresh drawing carefully protected beneath her paper umbrella. Look what I finished today. She unfolded the page with excitement. A bright rainbow stretched across the picture above 3 smiling figures standing together outside Willow Heights. Ethan chuckled warmly. Another masterpiece. Lily pointed proudly at the rainbow. My teacher says rain helps make beautiful things appear afterward. Victoria looked at the drawing much longer than anyone expected. Your teacher sounds very wise. Lily smiled. I think so too. Ethan glanced toward the small cafe across the street, where warm lights glowed through rain-covered windows. It looks like the rain is not stopping anytime soon. Would you like to join Lily and me for a cup of hot chocolate? They make the best one in the neighborhood. Victoria's heart skipped quietly inside her chest. For one beautiful second, she imagined saying yes, walking across the street with them, laughing over warm drinks, and pretending they were already the family Lily kept drawing. But another thought quickly followed. Ethan had told her only days earlier that he wanted to give someone new a chance. She refused to become the reason he questioned that decision before he fully understood his own heart. Victoria smiled with gentle gratitude. Thank you. That is a wonderful invitation, but I still have a few things waiting for me tonight. Ethan looked slightly disappointed, though he tried not to show it. Another time, then. I would like that, Victoria answered sincerely. She opened her umbrella once more before stepping back into the gentle rain. As she walked toward her car, she allowed herself one final glance over her shoulder. Ethan and Lily were already laughing together as they crossed toward the little cafe. Victoria smiled through quiet tears that the rain kindly hid from everyone else. More than anything, she hoped happiness would always find Ethan. Yet for the first time, she found herself afraid that before he ever discovered the truth about the love silently waiting beside him, someone else might convince him that he had already found home. The weekend passed quietly, but Ethan Brooks could not ignore the growing feeling that something inside him had begun to change. On Monday afternoon, while Lily happily finished her homework at the kitchen table, his phone vibrated with a message from Emily. She thanked him for the enjoyable afternoon at the cafe and asked if he would like to meet again the following Saturday. Ethan smiled as he read her thoughtful words. She truly was kind. She was intelligent, patient, and easy to talk with. She deserved complete honesty. Instead of answering immediately, he placed the phone beside his coffee mug and stared out the apartment window toward the familiar courtyard below. Children played basketball beside the community garden. Elderly neighbors rested on benches beneath the maple trees. A maintenance worker planted fresh flowers near the entrance. Everything around Willow Heights carried the same quiet warmth that had slowly become part of his life, and somehow every meaningful memory that surfaced in his mind seemed connected to Victoria Hayes. He remembered her encouraging Lily before every school event. He remembered her comforting frightened residents during a winter power outage by personally checking on every apartment. He remembered the way she listened without interruption whenever anyone spoke, making even the smallest concern feel important. Ethan suddenly realized he had been comparing every new conversation to years of ordinary moments he had shared with someone he had never truly stopped to understand. Later that afternoon, he walked Lily toward the community library before returning through the courtyard alone. Victoria happened to be there, speaking with an elderly resident about replacing several worn benches before winter. When she noticed Ethan approaching, she smiled with the same gentle kindness she always carried. "How are we going?" she asked. Ethan slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. "Better now," Victoria laughed softly. That sounded encouraging. They began walking together beneath the shade of the maple trees, neither of them in any hurry to reach a destination. Ethan finally broke the comfortable silence. "Emily asked if I would like to see her again this weekend." Victoria kept her expression calm, even though her heart immediately tightened. "She must have enjoyed spending time with you." Ethan nodded slowly. "She did." He hesitated before continuing. "The strange thing is that I have spent the last 2 days thinking less about the date and more about someone else." Victoria gently lowered her eyes toward the quiet sidewalk. She was afraid to ask the question that suddenly filled her thoughts. Before she could speak, Ethan looked toward the courtyard where Lily was laughing with several neighborhood children. "I have been remembering little moments that never seemed important until now." Victoria remained silent. Ethan smiled thoughtfully. "Every time Lily needed encouragement, you were there. Every holiday, every school event, every difficult season, somehow you always appeared exactly when we needed kindness." Victoria answered carefully. "People deserve kindness whether they expect it or not." Ethan looked directly into her eyes for the first time that afternoon. "I used to think those things happened by coincidence." Victoria felt years of carefully guarded emotions pressing gently against her heart. She knew that if she remained silent much longer, she might lose the chance she had quietly surrendered again and again. She took a slow breath before speaking with complete honesty, her voice almost no louder than the autumn breeze moving through the trees. "Ethan, if you decide to keep seeing Emily, I will sincerely hope she gives you every happiness you deserve." Ethan waited quietly. Victoria continued, her eyes glistening but her posture never losing its quiet dignity. "But before you choose a future without ever knowing how I truly feel, there is something I can no longer keep hidden." She paused for only a heartbeat before the words escaped with years of love, patience, and hope carried inside them. "She cannot love you like I do." The courtyard suddenly felt impossibly still. The laughter of distant children faded into the background. The breeze gently stirred the falling leaves between them. Ethan simply stood there, unable to speak, because in that single quiet sentence, he finally understood that the greatest love of his life had never arrived unexpectedly. It had been walking beside him all along, waiting with extraordinary patience for the day he would finally see it. Ethan Brooks did not answer immediately. He simply stood beneath the quiet maple trees, looking into Victoria Hayes' eyes as though the entire journey of the past several years had suddenly rearranged itself before him. Every small memory that had once seemed ordinary now carried a completely different meaning. The repaired heating system before winter arrived. The scholarships quietly offered to neighborhood children. The new playground equipment. The wheelchair ramps. The anonymous holiday gifts left for struggling families. The countless afternoons Victoria somehow appeared exactly when someone needed encouragement. None of it had been coincidence. None of it had been obligation. It had all grown from a heart that loved without asking for recognition. Ethan slowly lowered his eyes before speaking. "I thought I understood what kindness looked like." His voice remained calm, but emotion gently filled every word. "Now I realize I only saw the surface." Victoria offered a small, uncertain smile. "You never owed me anything, Ethan. Loving someone quietly was my choice." Ethan shook his head. No, you gave Lily and me something much greater than help. You gave us stability when our world had fallen apart. Victoria felt tears gather once more, but she remained composed. I never wanted gratitude. Ethan looked at her with complete honesty. And that is exactly why your kindness changed so many lives. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The peaceful courtyard seemed wrapped in gentle silence, while autumn leaves drifted slowly across the sidewalk. Finally, Ethan smiled, and this time the warmth reached his eyes exactly as Lily had always described. The day Lily asked if my heart felt happy after my date, I could not answer her. Victoria listened quietly. Now I finally know why. He took one careful step closer. I spent so much time looking for a new beginning that I never realized the place where my heart felt safest had been beside you all along. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, as though allowing herself to believe those words for the first time. Are you certain? She asked softly. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Completely certain. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. After a quiet moment, he sent Emily a respectful message, thanking her for her kindness, and explaining that he could not continue because he had finally understood where his heart truly belonged. He wished her nothing but happiness and peace. When he placed the phone back into his pocket, he felt lighter than he had in years. At that exact moment, Lily came skipping across the courtyard, carrying another folded drawing. She stopped when she noticed both adults standing together with unusually emotional expressions. Did I interrupt something? She asked innocently. Ethan smiled and knelt beside her. Actually, sweetheart, I think you arrived at exactly the right time. Lily looked from her father to Victoria before opening the drawing she had just finished. Once again, it showed 3 smiling people standing together outside Willow Heights. But this time she had added a small neighborhood cafe in the background with warm lights shining through the windows. I thought maybe we could all have hot chocolate together someday, she said with complete sincerity. Victoria laughed through happy tears while Ethan looked at the picture in amazement. You always seem to know the ending before the rest of us, he said gently. Lily shrugged with a grin. It was easy. Ethan stood and offered his hand to Victoria. She accepted it with quiet confidence. Not because of wealth or status, but because trust had already been built through years of silent compassion. The 3 of them walked slowly toward the little cafe across the street as evening settled over Willow Heights and the windows glowed with welcoming light. Neighbors smiled as they passed, unaware that nothing extraordinary had happened in appearance, yet everything had changed inside 3 grateful hearts. Ethan glanced at Victoria and spoke the words he wished he had understood much sooner. Home was never a place I needed to find. It was the person who quietly walked beside us every step of the way. Victoria smiled with peaceful joy. Lily squeezed both of their hands, and together they disappeared into the warm light, proving that the greatest miracles are often built not through grand gestures, but through quiet dignity, patient love, and the courage to finally tell the truth.